A lot of marketing teams would be thrilled to put out one or maybe two brand films every year. But in 2017, cult favorite cycling brand Rapha put out 21 of them. As the head of marketing and sales for Asia Pacific, Luke O'Shea oversaw 7 of those films in cities like Seoul, Osaka, and Hong Kong. We're going to hear all the ups and downs of aligning a global team, producing that many films with so many variables, and about the impact that that kind of content can have on a brand. But we're also going to hear some of the secrets to working with a founder-led company and how to make global brands feel relevant on a local level. But first, a little background. Luke grew up on Tasmania, an island state of Australia, and growing up, he was much more focused on sports than on marketing.
Being a sports-crazed young child that would just consume any sport on TV or through media, or just playing it. I grew up in a small town on a small island in Australia, so there wasn't much else to do except be active and outside. But I think, just early memories, and, we were talking about the Olympics. We were chatting again to another friend about your earliest memory of the Olympics. And I think you grew up in Australia, especially, you grow up with this whole mentality around sport being pretty much life.
And as is often the case, that passion led Luke initially into sales. He landed a role at Asics, or Asics, as he would say, in accounts, and that quickly turned into a role as a product marketing manager, where he got to see brand and product, how they really depend on each other to create strong product market fit.
It's pretty exciting to be at that really early infancy of product and ideas. It does take a long time for some of those to come to market, and by the time they come to market, you're a little bit sort of like, oh, I'm over that, I'm on to the next thing. So as I said, for nearly 5 years, I think, there with Asics. So really working with global teams and especially on the footwear side, performance footwear, lifestyle footwear, and launching global stuff. You never really dream of that, having that impact when you're born on a small island in Australia. You just go, wow, I'm actually doing stuff that's people in Europe or people in the US that are engaging with. It's pretty sort of like pinch me moment early on.
You mentioned something that always strikes me, that tension between product that's always working several years into the future and brand and marketing that's kind of working in the right now, like this moment right now. And the tension of, as a marketer, trying to get insights from the product team when the product team's like, I stopped thinking about that 2 years ago. Like, don't make me talk about that product that's out right now. But as a marketer, you have to tell that story. So you've gotten to sit on both sides of that.
Yeah, it's, and I think I've seen it work really well, and I've seen it not work so well. And I think it sort of comes back to the fact of, what is leading the business. And I think this day and age, I think a lot of businesses, especially in the current environment, a lot of businesses are really grappling with, what's leading the business. Is it sales? Is it brand? Is it product? And I think if you've got that really strong core of what the brand stands for, what you're trying to do, what consumer you're going after, it makes it a lot easier when you've got a long, product development pipeline, because essentially it doesn't change that much, and it's much easier to just remember those facts and figures of the benefits or features of a certain product to go to market with, because it doesn't change. Whereas if it's sales, you're chopping and changing depending on the consumer channel that you're after, and that's when it becomes really tough for you to then pull yourself back to the present to go, oh, what was this all about? Oh, this doesn't actually match how we've actually gone to market. It's that real disparity. And I think that's where a lot of brands are getting caught out, that they've got that, they're developing that product, and by the time they go to market, that their brand has moved on or the consumer's moved on. And it's really tough.
Luke took all his learnings from Asics into a much smaller brand, Icebreaker. And it wouldn't be his last foray into New Zealand merino. But it was his first taste of being immersed in a founder-led brand. From there, he moved over into the media side of things, managing brand, marketing, and strategy at Fox Sports, until an unexpected opportunity came along to go back into the brand side.
Funnily enough, I got a tap on the shoulder from a recruiter or an email through the beautiful LinkedIn.
My favorite social channel.
Yeah. At first, I thought it was a junk email, someone reaching out. I was like, oh, this isn't true. I was like, okay, I'll reply back. And it turned out that to be a little cycling brand that was based in the UK was looking for someone to run their Asia Pacific operations and help them expand in the region. And funnily enough, I'd actually talked to the founder of this business probably about 3 or 4 years earlier about a role in Australia, but hadn't worked out career-wise or timing-wise, and who they were after at that stage was someone different. And not known to the recruiter that I had this relationship. They just found me and had that initial chat. I told them that I knew the founder, and they connected me with the founder, and we had a chat. And 3 months later, I found myself in Hong Kong running Asia Pacific for Rapha, which was, a bit of, again, it was that full circle moment to find yourself in a different country and working with a brand that you'd followed through their infancy, through when they entered the market to where they were, was super exciting. Joining them at a time where they were really, on this trajectory of growth and really pushing the barrier, not only from a cycling standpoint, but from a brand standpoint as well. So I spent 3 years in Hong Kong, traveling around Asia, launching the brand in different regions, so Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand. Again, being a regional head, got great exposure to other regional heads in the global team. And, really that, I think, was probably fundamentally the biggest learning role I had from an exposure standpoint, and just how to really create an understanding internally about what brand means. And it was just so simple that it was kind of scary, but it really created efficiencies for us to do the best job we could from a regional and standpoint. And it allowed us to, we had that freedom to really execute what we needed to do, but we were all building up to this, bigger mission or vision that we had as a brand.
Even beyond Rapha, Luke stayed at founder-led brands that were innovating in technical materials, moving on to help grow the Australian compression brand 2XU, sometimes known as 2XU, as their CMO for 3 years. And most recently, he was CMO for Mons Royale, another New Zealand-based merino brand. That's where Luke first came into my orbit. He brought on my agency Monday to develop the brand essence for Mons, supported by audience insights, new audience personas, and then all of that work led into strategy work for their retail spaces and a new collection launch. I want to talk about what you're up to now, but first, you mentioned something and you kind of hinted at it multiple times, which is the fun and interesting challenge of working at founder-led brands and the lessons that you picked up. So, between Icebreaker, Rapha, Mons Royale, you definitely have worked directly with lots of founders. What do you think are the secrets as a brand and marketing leader? Because that, until you come along, it's their baby, How do you navigate that? What are the secrets?
Oh, yeah, it's a super tough one. I think there's always going to be that element of, especially in marketing, I think founders tend to have a real hold on product marketing and sales. They probably don't touch finance that much. They let that to the CFO, but you come into a business, you want to make traction straight away, right? There's so many things you want to do, and you think, oh, this is exciting. I can change this, I change that. With a founder, it's a little bit different. I think, and you've just got to take that time to sort of take that step back and spend time with them going fundamentally what they feel are the bigger problems. And then, diving deep into those and really bringing them on that journey to saying, well, this isn't actually a problem, this is, and really educating them about that, because, what they see in their head might be very different to what, the employees see or the consumer sees. So I think bringing on that journey is imperative. There's nothing worse, or, not being a founder, but I feel like there's nothing worse than a founder feel like they're locked out or not included. I think that's just not going to end well. But I think also that I've been very lucky with the founders I've worked with. They've been very open to not knowing everything. So they've created this environment that you are actually free to contribute from day one. Even Simon at Rapha, he used to come out to Asia and he would basically have a blank page and go, I know nothing about this country. Tell me everything there is to know. He wouldn't, he obviously knows the brand and he knows the UK and he knows Europe, and I think that created a real easy environment for you to feel like you could contribute and really make a difference. And I think that was super key. And I think developing that relationship early on is key for you to get that relationship with a founder, because that's when you can start to do the cool stuff.
Great. Well, we're going to come back to the cool stuff, but we're going to talk about some other cool stuff first. Right now, I mean, anyone that follows you on social media knows you're deep in the photography world right now. You're shooting Sydney FC, you're doing tons of endurance sport photography, and hearing you talk about your time at Fox Media too, that gives some context. How do you think that media lens kind of shapes how you approach marketing, or does it?
It definitely does. I think it was probably Rapha again that was really that catalyst in understanding the role of content and media when it comes to branding. I think they turned obviously the cycling world on its head when it came to their storytelling. Talking to Simon early on, and their whole strategy for entering the US market was based around films. Essentially, that was it. It wasn't anything else. It wasn't, and that was at the time very different. And I think that has really changed the landscape, not only from a cycling standpoint, but you see at this day and age, like longer form content coming from clubs or organisations to give people more access or more insights. The amount of sports documentaries on Netflix at the moment, Prime, it's definitely changed that landscape around the way that people tell stories. And I think everyone from athletes through to brands, through to organisations or governing bodies are seeing the value in that. They're seeing that consumers engage with that much more than a print ad or a normal way of advertising. But for me, from a photography standpoint, it's all about storytelling. It's all about trying to convey what I'm seeing or think I'm seeing through the lens to someone else. But that's the beauty of still imagery, is that it's up to the viewer to interpret the way they see it. And I think that's what I love about it, like compared to video, is I could take an image and think it's great and it's telling this story, and someone might see something completely different.
Let's talk about Rapha, the big one. So fair to say they really set the standard for storytelling in the cycling space. And you were around when a lot of that was happening during this really special era for the brand. And you got to be specifically involved in the Rapha Rides campaign. Tell me about that.
Brands that I guess initially start out as challenger brands and end up to be category leaders probably all go on this trajectory of they get to a stage where what made them, I don't want to say cool or successful, sort of then makes them as a barrier. So like 4 or 5 years later, Rapha changed the game when it came to, new product. It was very toned down. It was very UK performance roadwear. That's very British, very refined, and had that initial groundswell. And, obviously the content and the way they communicated cycling in a different way was just completely different. But, it got to this stage of where cycling had started to really grow globally. And with that comes a lot more competition. So we had a lot more really smaller niche brands that were regional or local that were really creating engagement. And Rapha was sort of, in the cycling world, was perceived as the big player that was probably not engaging the local community or really relevant locally anymore. So our challenge is how do we, as a brand, remain true to what made us successful, but then make it locally relevant? Everyone might sort of think, you're the biggest cycling brand in the world, you must have huge budgets. You're in sports, you're in cycling, it's a niche sport, you don't have huge budgets. So we, as a regional or global team, would get together and basically come up with regional ideas from what are we going to do for the next 12 months? And we would present those as a global team because we wanted to collate them and basically come up with one idea that we could globally execute. Because, again, putting global resources behind it allowed us to then execute at a regional level, not trying to do way too many different things, straining the global resources, doing different communications. It was that simplicity of going, what are we going to really double down on next year? And the team in North America, at the time, I think most regions had what we called a mobile cycle club. So a little van that would turn up at events, serve coffee. It was based on an old H van from the Tour de France. Awesome little heritage thing, but it wasn't truly scalable. And Hillary Benjamin and the team from North America came up with this idea called the Rapha Caravan, where they'd travel to different cities and activate the cities. And, nothing different. Many other brands have done the top city approach. But of course, we had the secret sauce of Rapha when it came to community content and commerce. We had this powerful element of storytelling. We had the powerful element of community and creating experiences on rides or events that people wouldn't normally get. And then, of course, we had the product. So we had those three. So we came together and said, okay, this is a global idea. How are we going to push this out? And each region got, I think it was 7 cities to choose from. So, 21 cities across 12 months is a pretty good global campaign. And each city had to produce we had a set format, but what actually, when it came to a film, booklets, imagery, amount of rides, people you had to engage, but where it came really locally relevant was what the content was within that. So you could choose which riders it was. You could choose what kind of rides you did. You could choose your local film crew. So again, you're engaging really locally people. At the time, like, how would you like to film a Rapha film? Everyone was like, yeah, let me at it. So essentially we rolled that out for 12 months and, like anything Rapha, those films still live on in the world of YouTube. And I think people go back to them and just go, wow, these films are amazing. And I think what we did was our ability to make Rapha locally relevant, but also really fundamentally showcase globally that we were a global player, not only in the cycling world, but I think a lot of other brands outside of cycling took notice of that campaign from a way to really stick true to your brand values, but make it locally relevant.
So if I'm not mistaken, you did 21 films across the world during that time, and each of you took a different subset. So you were overseeing a handful of these cities. How do you create consistency across a global brand when you have different filmmakers, different marketing leaders, different teams executing? What's the secret to creating that consistency?
Yeah, it wasn't without its challenges. Don't worry, there was definitely some different interpretations of films, and I was definitely at one end that I wanted to do a really conceptual film. But again, I think it came back to really having a strong relationship with the global team, with the central team based in London. And it was a real understanding on they would always draw back to what we were trying to do as a brand and what we were trying to do. And I think if you've got that, you can have those discussions without really taking it personally. Every film is quite different because the culture of riding or cycling and the people around the globe are very different. You watch one from Hong Kong, you watch one from Portland, you watch one from London. They're all very different, but they seem to, like, as a collective, they all fit together.
And that's the beauty of a campaign like that too. Were there any major constraints that you had to play within? What were the rules?
There's the market is, ongoing constraint is always budget, right? So again, we didn't have a huge amount. It wasn't like an endless resource pool that we could pull on both financially and human. So there were certain elements that you had to rely on, whether it be internal staff, whether it be translation, whether it be elements like that. I was very lucky in the world of Asia Pacific that it's much, you get much more bang for your buck when it comes to content production in Asia, and you get top-notch talent and people and crew to execute it. You give and take, and next year you might get more to execute something else. And, that's the relationship you have. So, but apart from that, the format, we had it pretty much down pat. Like, Rapha had been doing film for a while. They've been doing little notebooks. So we were very lucky in the fact that the global team was they were very dialed. So they knew exactly how to brief us on what they needed. So it made it very easy for us to just go out and do elements of going, okay, we're going to do a guidebook. The word length needs to be this. You need this kind of GPS file, all done. It was very dialed. But, that still takes time on the ground to do. So, yeah, that was, time and budget. But, that's anything you do from a marketing standpoint, isn't it?
It's shockingly rare to see a global team actually working really cohesively on a single campaign. And one of the big challenges, at least that I've experienced when I've worked in-house at a brand, is having so many different competing pieces of content and knowing how to roll it out and what timeline to do it on and who gets priority and what launches when. How long did this campaign last for, and what were all the different touch points, and how did you guys negotiate that?
Yeah, so again, we contrary to what a lot of people believe, Rapha is not like a huge brand when it comes to, in the world of sports. In cycling, it was, but cycling is still a niche sport. It's still, it continues to grow. But from a budget standpoint and from a timing standpoint, we committed. Like it wasn't like there was, there were other activities we were doing globally. We had other activations like the Tour de France, and I think at that time we also we may have just finished with Team Sky, so we didn't have a pro peloton team, but we had other riders that would be activating. We'd have other events like Rapha Prestiges, but essentially this was it. We were doubling down on this. There wasn't, this was the overarching global campaign. Underneath that, there might have been one or two layers that, whether they would be specific product or specific events that would take shine, but this was it. We were fully committed to that. And I think, again, that's quite rare in the world of marketing, where you have a business willing to just go, this is what we're doing. Probably 40 to 50% of our resources, both human and financial, went towards that campaign.
You were executing, remind me, Seoul? Somewhere in Japan? Tokyo?
Yeah, Tokyo. So Seoul, Tokyo, Kyoto, Taipei, Sydney, Melbourne, and Hong Kong.
Those are all incredibly different regions. It cannot have been easy. What were some of the big challenges or roadblocks that you hit along the way?
I think, and probably to your previous question, the touch points was always, there was obviously a film. We had to do a film. We had to do cut downs of that film. There's a little road book that we used to produce, a landing page with content that featured the rides, that featured the riders or the protagonists, that we like to call them, that were featured in that film. We had to have a bit of diversity in those protagonists. So we'd have a Rapha employee. We'd have a key member that was probably a little bit more on the serious cycling standpoint, but then we'd also look out to other elements, whether it be music, art, photography, and someone that cycled or found bikes in their lifetime and brought that in. But the region, amazing. I think cycling as a sport is at so many different levels in all those countries. Timing, we've got a short window of summer in some of those countries, so everyone wants to do the same weekend. All of a sudden, I think once we had 3 weekends where we had Seoul, Taipei, and then Tokyo, 3 weekends in a row. So that was quite hectic. The beauty we had is we had the US go first. So you learn, you have a blueprint, and that creates a real clarity for the teams. Because again, the local teams just want to do the best job they want to do, especially in Asia. Like the teams I was working with just want to make it the best one. They want their city activation to be the best one. And that's the beauty of the team. They're so motivated, but sometimes that energy can lead to them doing things that aren't really lost energy of we want to do this. I'm like, well, pull it back to what the global framework is. Once you've got this and dialed this in, then we can do something else. Yeah.
Bringing it full circle, I want to talk results too, but bringing it full circle, the interesting thing is your photography now, especially your endurance running photography, makes me want to run all over the world. So every time I see you in a new country, I'm like, ooh, I'm going to add that to my list of places that I want to do a long run. Coming back to the campaign, it sounds like it was a success. What was the impact on the brand overall?
Well, I think Rapha has this, again, being a digital company from day dot gave it a huge advantage when it comes to measurement, metrics, impact. It wasn't solely driven, we weren't solely driven internally by metrics, or especially digital metrics. We did have a longer term brand objectives such as, RCC community membership, overseas visitors to different stores. That was a huge one for us because, if people were coming to our, store in Hong Kong, they would come there for a specific reason. You don't just wander into a cycling store, right? And the brand had really good measures on how to measure that. And so we would understand elements from top level metrics, from your content engagement through to the clubhouse on launching the film or playing it. If someone came into a store and they were from a different country, and the beauty in Hong Kong, right, where I was based, is we got a lot of overseas visitors because it's a hub. But people would come and go, yeah, I'm ending my stay in Hong Kong for 3 days because I want to rent a bike and cycle because I saw the film. So we would note that in our report. And, at the end of the year, we had all this feedback about when Rapha Rides was mentioned. really face to face.
It does seem like there's a certain type of cyclist who will always make a pilgrimage to the Rapha store in whatever city they're in. There's a culture around it, isn't there? Do you think that's where it started?
I think so, because before then we hadn't really tied the stores together. We'd opened stores, but we had our RCC membership that you pay to be a member of, but there was nothing that was really communicated beyond the members to that. So this was a front-facing consumer campaign that really gave people a further understanding of the network of the brand and what was available for it. Like, it wasn't just to members saying, oh, we've got these stores, you can visit, you can rent a bike. It was like, well, come and ride with us. Like, you can bring your own bike. And I think that was that real breaking down that barrier. It was like, it's not just for members. We've got our members that love the brand, but people started visiting going, yeah, I've got my 4 T-shirts from US stores. Now I've got my 5 T-shirts from Asia. I love the brand, and just evolved.
Rapha was really a trailblazer at the time. It feels like so many brands now have figured out the model of content. Not everyone's able to do it to the same scale. You've worked at so many different brands, which you've detailed in the kind of top of the podcast, but I know that you're always kind of keeping your fingers in the industry and paying attention. Who do you think is the next Rapha? Like, who do you think is doing something really innovative or interesting right now? And who are you keeping your eyes on? And what are they doing that is getting you excited?
Well, I think there's 2 different viewpoints, right? There's what I love, and then there's probably what's successful in the marketplace. I'm a storyteller. Like, I love the fact that long form storytelling is coming back. I think YouTube it's had this resurgence over the last 2 years of just really great long form content that's free to access, right? It's no longer behind a paywall. It's just there. And I think I could sit there and I probably have it playing in the background when I'm doing work. I just go down this YouTube rabbit hole of content, and it's not just brands. There's a lot more sporting organisations or clubs that are really seeing the value in content that people wouldn't normally get access to and putting it out there. That's the fundamental shift we're probably seeing in the last 2 or 3 years. We went down this performance marketing standpoint, and there's a role for performance marketing to play. But the brands that didn't invest in their brand during probably COVID are really battling now because they haven't built up that future demand. All they did worry about was performance marketing and just return on investment immediate. Whereas once we came out of that, all these brands that doubled down on it, such as your On Running, Arc'teryx, Tracksmith, are seeing that windfall now of like that brand investment come back to them.
Okay, 2 more questions for you. First one is, what's the best piece of marketing advice you've ever been given?
Wow. Before, I've been very lucky to work with some amazing founders, but also with some amazing marketing leaders who have really created an environment where I've been able to thrive, right? And, I think that's all you can ask for as a leader. And I think some of the best early advice I got was fundamentally that as you grow your career and move up in the ranks, so to speak, you don't have to know everything. When you get promoted the first time, you're like, shit, I need to know everything. I need to be across everything. And I think that was probably the biggest eye-opener for me, is being able to be vulnerable as a leader, especially in marketing, because things are changing so fast. For me, my philosophy is I hire a team around me that know more than me, especially in the world of social media and that element, because it changes so quick. It's like, I'm not across that, so I'm going to hire someone to do it. Like, I don't know about it. But no, like my boss at Fox Sports, Carly Loader, who's now at Red Bull in the US, said to me early on was, you don't have to know everything. And my position at the time was head of strategy and insights. So you can imagine what that felt like. I was just like, oh, really? Okay. I thought I was meant to know everything in my role. But that really, for her to say that as CMO and in a really aggressive environment that was like pretty cutthroat sports media, it still is. But I think that created a real, not sense of ease, but my ability to just go, I can go away from a meeting saying, I'll just follow that up. You don't have to sit there in a meeting and have all the answers. And that's probably the biggest lesson I've taken from it, is just, you just got to ring true and going, you know what, if I'm vulnerable as a leader, that creates a pretty good environment for my team when it comes to understanding their strengths, weaknesses, and asking for help. And that's all you can do.
And I think as a leader too, there's this practice of unlearning that's really important. Like I have deliberately unlearned how to use every design tool. So my team never has to worry about me going in and tampering with documents. It's like it forces me to rely on them, or unlearning social media, because it doesn't make sense for me to be in those spaces. And I think once you get to a level in your career, it's better to keep your head kind of up here in the high level strategy space and not necessarily know all the details down below. Okay, last question for you is just, what are you up to now and where can people find you?
Obviously, you already mentioned, like I'm deep in the world of the photography business. It's a hustle. It's a great hustle. It's something fresh. It's when, you start from scratch again, it's kind of, again, that shit, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? But I'm sort of working on creating the network around that, creating opportunities. Again, using it as a tool to educate brands on how they can tell stories better. And I think that's why I see it as an advantage for myself, is my marketing background does bring a different insight to pitching, because I fundamentally probably understand what they're trying to do as a business or a brand or as an athlete. So doing that, I haven't completely removed myself from the world of marketing and brand. I'm working on a couple of projects with a couple of smaller brands on really creating those foundations internally, brands that are looking to scale, whether it be through new product, whether it be through new consumers or new channels. It's good fun, as I said, like finding those brands that are willing to take those risks, and you've got to show them the benefit, right? You've got to break down that door and say to them, saying, well, if you just did this, you will get this in 18 months' time. Not every brand's going to be up for that. People can find me, LinkedIn. I think my name, Luke O'Shea, I think it's just O'Shea Luke, which is pretty easy, which is pretty rare. My Instagram is the other 12 hours, so the number 12. Someone asked me about, where I came up with that name, but essentially when I started Instagram many, many years ago, not knowing what it would grow into, it was all about my life outside of work, right? The other 12 hours. But people come up to me and go, oh, you're the other 12 hours. It's like, my name's actually Luke, but we'll run with this anyway. So, but yeah, that's, my main two channels. Two's enough, right? Two's enough channels great. To try. Yeah.
And you're putting a lot of content. So by all means, give Luke a follow. The other 12 hours, beautiful photography. Check him out on LinkedIn. Appreciate your time, Luke. Always lovely to chat.
Thank you very much.